Witches have haunted the passages of folklore throughout history. Oriental sorceresses, European hags, and voodoo priestesses are all variations on the same theme. Women in league with supernatural evil. They were blamed for the stillborn, bad crops, sudden illness, and anything else frightened men could not explain away. America has a long tradition of persecuting witches. The famous trial in Salem was just one example of a mania that swept through the colonies. Women accused of witchcraft were drowned, hanged, and burned at the stake. These bloody spectacles were widespread until late in the 18th century, when another bloody spectacle took their place, the American Revolution. After the War for Independence, history books tell us little about witchcraft in the United States. Local and regional folk tales, however, are full of references to supernatural occurrences and their all-too-earthly consequences. One of the most dramatic examples of this is the Blair Witch of Western Maryland, which originated with an extremely rare book. Supposedly written in 1785, it is entitled The Blair Witch Cult. Commonly considered fiction, this strange tome documents the fate of an unknown Maryland township cursed by an outcast hag. Several children accused Ellie Kedward of luring them into her home to draw blood from them. In court, the children's wounds would prove damning evidence, and Kedward was found guilty of witchcraft and banished from the village in the middle of a particularly harsh winter. She was assumed to have died from exposure. Although the name of the town is not mentioned in the book, it is assumed from the title that it is set in Blair County, and the region's bizarre history certainly supports this assumption. In 1883, a hermit named Rustin Parr abducted and murdered 7 children in the county's Black Hill area. Parr stated at his trial that he killed them for an old woman ghost. Whether he was telling the truth or simply manipulating the old legend will never be known. He was hanged for the crime and maintained the story of his supernatural accomplice all the way to the gallows. In 1890, an 8-year-old girl was reported missing and search parties were dispatched. The girl was found the next day, but one of the posses failed to return. The bodies of the 3 men were found in Dixon Drove Cave 2 weeks later. The men had been disemboweled, their teeth pulled, and unrecognizable symbols had been carved into their faces, hands, and feet. The missing girl claimed that she had been led into the forest by an old woman who walked without touching the ground. In 1889, 11 witnesses testified to seeing a pale woman's hand reach up and pull 10-year-old Kayleen Treacle into Tappy East Creek. Her body was never recovered from a stream only 2 feet deep. For 13 days after the drowning, the creek was clogged with oily bundles of sticks, and the water was undrinkable. These accounts are verifiable by newspaper articles and legal documents that are stored, along with the only known copy of the Blair Witch Cult, in the Maryland State Historical Museum. While these stories have gathered dust in glass cases, they have slowly been absorbed into the campfire ghost stories told by Blair residents. Local folklorists tell of hearing the cries of the witch's young victims echoing through the trees. Others claim that sections of the Black Hill area are lost in time, and that once entered, there is no way out. It was these simple folk tales, told to her by her grandmother, that first attracted Montgomery College film student Jane Steiner to the legend of the Blair Witch. A born journalist and a dedicated artist, Jane was drawn to the eerie mystery of the story's origins. After an interview with Rockville occultist Norm Terwether, Jane learned of the history behind the folklore and was hooked. After graduating, she raised $5,000 from family and friends, enlisted the help of classmates cameraman John Miller and sound recordist Billy Madsen, and began making plans to shoot a documentary on the Blair Witch. In October of 1993, the film crew arrived in Blair, the county seat of Blair County, to shoot 2 interviews and establishing shots of the surrounding area. Jane interviewed Mary Brown on the evening of October 12th and Chester Norris the morning of the 13th. Norris told the filmmakers that the graves of the hermit's victims in the cave where the posse's bodies were found were less than 20 minutes from the town and were easily accessible by an old logging road. A clerk at a local convenience store saw the 3 that afternoon when they stopped to buy snack food and drinks. He would be the last person to see Jane Steiner, John Miller, or Billy Madsen alive. When Madsen failed to report to work 2 days in a row, his employer contacted Steiner's roommate, who in turn called Angie Steiner, Jane's mother. The first APB was issued on the 17th, and the Maryland State Police launched their search of the Black Hill area on October 18th. This operation would last 10 days and include up to 100 men aided by dogs and helicopters. 8 months later, the investigation, which included experts from the FBI, was terminated. 33,000 man-hours had failed to find a trace of the filmmakers, their car, or their gear. The case was declared inactive and unsolved June 23, 1994. Then, in October of 1995, students from the University of Maryland's Anthropology Department discovered a duffel bag full of film cans and videotapes buried under the foundation of a 200-year-old cabin. When the evidence was examined, Blair Sheriff Ron Cravens announced that the 17 rolls of black and white film and 43 8mm videotapes were indeed the property of Jane Steiner and her crew. After an initial month-long study of the bag's contents, the sheriff declared the footage to be an elaborate hoax. Outraged, Angie Steiner launched 2 unsuccessful lawsuits against the state of Maryland to release the footage. Finally, under pressure from state officials, the sheriff agreed to release the evidence to the filmmaker's next of kin when the legal limit of its classification runs out. On October 23rd, this footage will be given over to the estates of Jane Steiner, John Miller, and Billy Madsen. On that day, a new investigation will begin. Angie Steiner has contracted Haxon Films to perform the first private sector investigation of the Blair tapes. The Blair Witch Project will be an unprecedented journey into the heart of one of America's most mysterious puzzles. Haxon Films hopes to uncover the hidden truth about the Black Hill disappearances.